100 Years of Deeley. It begins in 1903. The world was changing with the widespread application of the internal combustion engine. Meanwhile, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a young motorcycle manufacturer by the name of Harley-Davidson was starting its first year of operation. At the same time, across the pond in Bromsgrove, England, a bicycle shop opened its doors, run by Trev Deeley Sr, who would become known as the Cycle Man. 14 years later, in 1917, history was made when Harley-Davidson and Trev Deeley Sr signed the third Harley-Davidson dealership agreement and the first in a foreign country. By now, the business, along with the Deeley family, had relocated to Vancouver years earlier, a city that was establishing itself as a hub for industry and growth in Western Canada. It was on Granville Street where the family business expanded under the direction of son Trev Deeley Jr, who took over motorcycle operations in 1925. This was the beginning of the legacy that grew when a third generation was added with young Trev Deeley at only 15 years old, joining the company as a motorcycle apprentice in 1935. It was clear from an early age that Trev Deeley Sr.'s grandson was passionate not just about fixing motorcycles, but riding them as well. Trev Deeley proved in the coming years to be an extraordinary talent, with a reputation for pushing the limits of speed and performance on a bike. He dominated the sport of motorcycle racing in the Pacific Northwest in the 40s and 50s, earning the title Mr. Motorcycle while riding the number 22 plate. By 1953, Trev was running the business as general manager at 606 East Broadway, an address that remained the same for the next 46 years. And in 1954, when Trev Deeley Sr. decided it was time to retire, he transferred ownership of the dealership to Trev Deeley Jr, who held it for the next 21 years up until 1975. That's when Trev Deeley, along with his new business partner Don James, purchased the dealership, changing the name to Trev Deeley Motorcycles. It was during this period that they were presented with an extraordinary opportunity to become the exclusive distributor for Harley-Davidson motorcycles by supplying all bikes and parts to the rest of the Canadian dealerships. So, both Trev and Don James began by traveling across Canada in 1975, introducing their new company, Deeley Harley-Davidson Canada, to dealers across the country. From its humble beginnings of 13 dealers, soon Trev and Don grew it to around 90 dealerships in just a few years. They were an amazing team, but as the company grew, they added another key partner, Malcolm Hunter. Malcolm was brought on as a chief operating officer. He was a star in the company, and in August of 1988, when Trev Deeley made the decision to sell his controlling interest to Don James, Malcolm was appointed President of Canada. In 2002, Trev Deeley passed away.
A legend in his own time, motorcycle racer.
But not after being inducted into the American Motorcycling Hall of Fame, Canadian Motorsports Hall of Fame, and the BC Sports Hall of Fame in recognition of his outstanding contribution to all aspects of motorcycling. With Trev's passing, Don and Malcolm continued to build and expand the business for years to come, as they moved it into its present location at 1875 Boundary Road in 2006. This 45,000 square foot facility was built to not only showcase the latest Harley-Davidson models, but also pay homage to the company's rich history with a beautiful retrospective museum, the Deeley Motorcycle Exhibition, which opened to the public in 2007.
For over 3 decades, Darwin Osachuk ran the day-to-day operations as the general manager, until his decision to retire in 2023. His successor, Mike Chisholm, now builds off that strong foundation, introducing a fresh perspective to the ever-evolving challenges of running the day-to-day business in Canada's oldest Harley-Davidson dealership.
There have been a lot of milestones during this time, including both Trev and Don serving as board of directors for Harley-Davidson USA. Trev served a total of 9 years before retiring in 1993, and when Don replaced Trev, he remained in that seat until 2017 before the decision to retire.
And I know Trevor Deeley had a bit of a reputation for having been gifted this business. That wasn't the fact at all. He had to earn it, and his father didn't cut him any quarter. He had to do it himself.
For many generations, the dealership was passed down from father to son, with each new leader building upon the legacy of those who came before them. And in 2016, Don James continued this tradition as he sold the business to his son, Darren James, making Darren the fifth owner of Canada's oldest Harley-Davidson dealership, which recently celebrated 100 years in 2017. Darren, like Trev, had a similar upbringing, being raised in and around the Harley-Davidson dealership, learning to ride a motorcycle by the age of 3. And like Trev, Darren too devoted himself to racing motorcycles. Since 2000, Darren has been lining up on grids at the biggest stages of road racing, all over the world, including Daytona, the Northwest 200, and the Isle of Man, to name a few. Racing professionally now for decades, Darren has developed a combination of strategic thinking, risk-taking, and the ability to adapt to changing conditions. All skills that will now be used off the track to forge his own legacy within the motorcycle business. 5 generations, 2 families, and over 100 years as business partners with one of the most iconic brands in the world is a truly remarkable accomplishment.